Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, Omicron. Welcome to CareTalk, America's home for incisive debate about healthcare business and policy. I'm David Williams, president of Health Business Group.
And I'm John Driscoll, the CEO of CareCentric. What were you going on about, David?
Well, John, the variants are getting all the attention these days, and I'm thinking maybe we need to compete with a new variant of our own show. How about we add a couple of mutations to the podcast?
Well, maybe not mutations, but today we have two actual guests, not mutants or mutations. Matt Holt from the Healthcare blog and Jessica Damassa from WTF Health, self-described loudmouths who know health tech and are very close to the pulse of everything that's going on in digital. Welcome, Matt and Jessica.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Listen, it's our pleasure. Now, I understand you just came back from an overseas trip, and now are you the ones that brought the variant home with you?
Absolutely. 100%. It came home with us.
Were we in South Africa? I thought we were in Milan. Didn't they have it
yes.
before we got there?
It's all connected over there.
Yeah, it's confusing.
David, I think that you're going to, there's this ridiculous press focus on who brought what to whom. We've got a serious new variant, Omicron, which you were sort of eventually going to get as you work through your Greek alphabet. But I think it is something serious, but perhaps not as serious as the market's initial response. I mean, what do you make of this, David?
I don't know, John. I think we have the variants right here with us, and I think it's nice that you're defending them. But yeah, it's scary. Who knows? It's all the way from the most scary to the least scary. You think about viruses the way they usually evolve as they become more contageous and less harmful, and we can hope that's the case here. But people are worried otherwise, and maybe the market is just waiting because it was the point where it was a little bit bloated, and any little thing could set it off. But what do our guests think?
Jessica, what do you think?
Well, it's interesting that none of the health tech stocks have rebounded as a result of this, because you would expect that to happen, right? Because those were the stocks that took off, over the summer when things were dicey and everybody was seeking care virtually and couldn't go to the hospital. But those stocks seem to be doing much better as a result of this. I'm pretty surprised about that, actually.
Well, actually, Telegram went up dramatically for about 5 seconds and then came down again. And I was going to say
it's near 100 now, right?
It's not doing so great. Yeah. Oh
well. But there was a fair amount of excess support for those stocks, at least briefly. I've got a personal passion for digital health, but not the extraordinary valuations they were getting. And I think that you are going to see, though, David, a fair amount of interest in Moderna and Pfizer, and particularly anyone who's in testing, because the big gap we actually are in a much better shape than we were last March. We've got a platform with our mRNA that I will eventually be able to say it without stumbling, technology that's programmable. We've got monoclonal antibodies that can cure the disease if you get it early, that are programmable. The mechanism of action of these new anti-COVID pills appears to capture what we believe the Omicron variant to be. And to your point, it may actually be a lot less virulent. And we don't really even know whether it's that transmissible, but we've got a lot of defense in depth from a therapeutic and vaccine perspective. But I still think we got big gaps in testing. So I'd be looking to be buying those testing stocks right now.
Well, John, you're Mr. Timeliness on the tips there. Now, in terms of the pronunciation, if you just remember your great aunt Myrna, that will help you remember the mRNA. That's my tip of the day.
Myrna.
But let's go back to this digital health point. I mean, Matt, you and I have been looking at this for a while. I mean, a lot longer than our younger friend Jessica and the one who looks older, David. But tell what do you think's driving this extraordinary amount of capital into not just the big names like a Teladoc, but pretty much there's money falling out of the trees for digital health stocks.
Yeah, I think that is roughly true. So the issue is it's the capital, right? Not the digital health. That's the important part here, because you've got this massive leap in capital and essentially free money that's traveling the globe. I think I heard Mark Andreessen say at some point that there was $17 trillion being lent to governments at negative interest rates across the globe. And, so there's a lot of capital around. Clearly, you have a lot of private equity companies now becoming VCs. Tiger Global being the biggest example, right? Putting in money left, right, and center and doing things in a way that's much quicker, much more aggressive, much higher valuations than traditional VCs have done. You also have private equity companies taking companies out at extraordinary amounts. And I think the one that is most, many of us are slapping our heads is how did Athena Health go from being worth, $5.5, 6 billion 3 years ago to being worth 17 billion today? And I have some theories about that regarding, how much leverage there is and basically the incentives of those private equity companies who leverage up their assets a lot, and make money on increments of growth. However, overall, if you want to take the positive argument, it's that we have the $4 trillion healthcare system. Much of it is incredibly inefficient, could use disrupting, and could be changed around. And therefore, it's reasonable to expect there will be some winners in many different categories. And therefore, if you can become a winner in a category, you might have a really big company. Not every investor can be in every company, so they're all, picking one or two per category and diving in. But yes, I think it's fair to say the valuations have got crazy, mostly because of what happened with Teladoc and Livongo, when that massive stock burst of Livongo, which Jessica will explain to you how she bought at 16 and the rest of us didn't, and she's very clever. And it ran it up, and then they had the merger, and that meant that every other company going public, then after from 2020 onwards, has this new valuation. It's coming out at 20 times revenues or whatever some crazy metric is, and earnings not required, profits not required, fast revenue growth required, and that's it. And that's, I think, why there's been so much activity in the public markets, the private markets. The public markets, which have had a lot of activity. If you go back to, 3 years ago when I was looking at this, there were almost no publicly traded stocks. There was still Castlight. You may remember that one, John. There was ouch, but not too many, right? And now there's 50 odd in the category. You could say they've gone public via SPAC or have gone IPO'd or what have you. And then you have a lot of something else about some large scale buyouts, right, from incumbent players. So between all of that, there's a lot of activity. I just don't. I think the fact that the public markets were at their height in February and are now off by a factor of 50%, and yet the private markets seem to be still
very robust
and going up that has to reconcile itself one with the other. And I suspect to reconcile itself in a private market slowdown at some point, but I don't see it yet.
Jessica, what's your take on it? All this money flowing towards these companies.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, I haven't been watching this nearly as long as you guys have, but it seems to be, almost cyclical.
Ouch.
I know, but you brought it up first. But I mean, I think that I think you can't ignore the connection between the venture funding as well, in addition to all of the stuff that's happening in the stock market. So it's not like it's just there's all of these companies that are going out and they're getting, backed by these private equity funds or bankers or even the public market. It's but you also have a lot of venture money as well that's out there, and I think that's really all along the chain now, all along the growth process of a startup. It's shooting everything up, including the valuations. But it's already this year within this little health tech sector, it's passed the fundraising total for all of last year by quite a bit. And so it's on track to double what it was last year. So I think it's just, I don't know. I mean, I think that there is a lot of room in this space, which is why I think investors are so interested. So like Matthew said, I think that we've seen a lot of startup pitch decks with a huge total addressable market, like a big old TAM in there. And so I think that there is that. And I also think that it's there's just so much money in healthcare and things are pretty crappy in terms of healthcare delivery and things are not digitized. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement there. And I think a lot of investors are yeah, why not place a bet on this? And even though it seems like it's a lot of money, I mean, it's if you consider some of the other expenses that we have in healthcare, I always the number has gone up, but it's the average fundraising round this year is around $35 million. The CEO of Centene makes $25 million a year as a salary. So I mean,
David's
really,
a very happy guy with his new job.
Very happy. It's you're running a company.
He used to be a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
just saying, like, if you were to look at it that way, it's like we're like going nuts about this $35 million round. Like, that's the average. And it's like, yeah, this is like what that guy makes in a year. So it's like,
can we just avoid CEO pay as something we're going to talk about?
As a benchmark of how crazy this market is.
John now going back to his board with his benchmark of the 35 million.
Yeah. Actually, John, don't forget. John, if you think you're being underpaid, remember that includes bonus as well. So don't that's all reasonable.
Don't get bent out of shape on that.
Listen,
I actually have a serious question. So, John, I have a serious question for you about this, because I think a lot of this has happened that, one company in this sector gets funded. So take musculoskeletal, right, where Hinge has now raised 600 million, and now Sword Health has raised 150, and all these other guys are raising, Kaya's raised 200 or whatever. I mean, at some point, this is an arms race, right? There are only so many people you can call as an employer to sell them this MSK program, right?
Oh, it's ridiculous.
I mean, at some point, you've got to hire dangle the check in front of the sales guy with the contacts with the employers, all the rest of it. And if you've raised that money, it's kind of a validation. There is the problem. I think, you know this as well as anybody. If the company goes out too crazy at an early valuation, those people coming along later are not going to be able to share in the increase in the valuation. In fact, probably nobody will get that increase in valuation as much unless some miracle happens later and it becomes this incredibly dominant force. So, I'm not sure raising all this money is, these hundreds of millions is great for the employees, but I think it's potentially, the only way you can get yourself to stand above the parapet in that section and say, we are going to be the dominant company.
Yeah, I'd maybe take it a different thing, which is from the founder's perspective. If you have the opportunity, and I'm thinking of particularly some of the Tiger Global valuations, I want to double click on something you said, Matt, which is that the number of people who are willing to pay right now, bigger numbers for private valuations, has dramatically increased in the last 5 years. Tiger Global being a great example of, if the TAM, the total addressable market, is big, they'll pay a monster valuation. And for as long as it's a big idea, and the opportunity, while it does crowd out your employees' potential upside in shares, to never have to raise any more capital is super attractive to founders and CEOs. It's like, I can go to one party as opposed to Series A, Series B, Series, you're going, as David was going down the Greek alphabet, we're starting with Series D, E, and F.
Series, John, Series Omicron. Let's get real. Come on.
The other thing that's sort of interesting that's happened is that the institutional investors, the big pension funds, the retirement funds, have found over the last, if you look retrospectively, to your point, Matt, in a negative interest rate environment, the current track record for private equity is actually really good. It's in the high teens. And so if you want to give someone money right now in a complicated environment, a diversified portfolio of private equity bets, which brings more capital to them, which is going to just, I think, we talk about over liquidity in the global marketplace. I think it's even greater in healthcare. But it feels a little bit like early 01 to me, right before the internet crash. I was working at Priceline at the time, and we went from 17 to over 300 down to like $5 a share. Now it's in the thousands. And those companies that survived those valuations, even when they were crazy high, eBay, Amazon, Priceline, but there were thousands of other companies that went nowhere. And you're absolutely right, Matt. One of the challenges was the down rounds were dead rounds. There was no place to go. And I think if there are only so many hours in the day for employer benefit managers to meet with the cool new digital app company. I mean, I do think we're sort of the over invested rate. But we also have this $4 trillion empire of old and aging business sort of enterprise solutions that are just terrible consumer experiences. And so you can take the over under, but the amount of money is really stunning. I mean, David, what's your take on it?
John, my take is the following. I think I've heard enough about this ephemeral digital stuff and other people's money and all that. And I want to get Matt and Jessica's opinion on a couple of real gritty things. I want to talk about drugs, and I want to talk about guns. What do you think of that?
Well, can we combine the two and go drugs?
Sex and rock and roll in there too, or
they are combined in the sense that I want to hear a guy who is a foreigner, or at least has a foreign accent, who may have grown up with certain different things.
It's part of his consulting positioning. With the British accent, you get a lot more consulting.
Yeah,
and you
rhetoric.
For it.
They had rhetoric.
I'm charging in pounds, not in dollars, right?
Yeah, exactly. So those are related. So what does it look like? I mean, what is American drug? Let's put it together, Matt. What does American drug pricing and American gun policy and gun culture look like to you who grew up elsewhere?
Well, you can say there may be some, I mean, you'd be lying. You could say there may be some positive outcomes from American drug pricing. I can't see any positive outcomes from American gun policy. Just strikes me as completely nuts. But, I mean, so we're now having, you're 17, you can go off to some other state, go across state lines with an AK-47 and start being a paramedic and shoot a few people, and it's all okay. And I don't know. That to me is a very slippery slope when we've had the school shootings, and there seems to be nothing we can do about that, even though most people know the sensible solution. And we're probably at a point in the gun debate where there's so many guns out there now that I don't know how you get rid of them, even if you got the Australian solution of 95% of the country saying, yeah, okay, we're going to ban guns. And, so I don't know the solution to guns. So let's not talk about it anymore.
So guns, all right, so that's good. So now I teach you up.
Wait, David. We had Amy Andrews on the show. Right after she was on the show, she announced she's running for Congress from Mom's Demand. And, Matt, what was interesting was she was talking about in South Carolina where she's running. She's a pediatrician who's really involved. And that there were incremental wins I think guns are a public health issue, to your point. And I think we can make incremental wins even in a wildly overly armed country. And I don't think we can go to drugs where I think we are actually making some progress there, David, but I don't want to, I think there's plenty of room for sensible gun safety policy, and we are incrementally making some progress.
I know, I'm in Florida where it's like they won't even wear masks to protect against a global pandemic, but there are probably more people who are armed in the grocery store than there are wearing masks at any given time. I don't think I give a good beat on safety in terms of the guns.
No, I mean, you do remember, right? The Bureau, the ATF, right? The Bureau of Arms Tobacco, was it Arms?
Alcohol, tobacco, and
fire. Why they lump those together, I don't know. They're back to sex and drugs and rock and roll, but they're not allowed to record anything in the computer. So basically, all the data that comes from the guns has to be taken out of Excel spreadsheets and microfiched, because Congress has said there's this bizarre. It's got this bizarre ideological flavor around it. In the Supreme Court, the way it is, I see. I mean, maybe we could have incremental progress, and God bless Amy from South Carolina, and I hope it works. But
wait, spreadsheets and data? Did we just end up into an EMR conversation all of a sudden? Hold on a second.
They're denying. Matt's exactly right. Now, the current administration is at least creating room for the research of violence as a public health issue, but that literally was outlawed, and there were all kinds of weird constraints put on not just the new regulation, but even studying or even documenting what they were doing. Matt's not off there.
It's nearly as crazy as American drug policy. Actually, it's crazy. But you asked about the drug policy. So, I think the drug policy. I mean, if you look at the data, right? I literally just wrote about this in my newsletter on Saturday. Kaiser Health News has polled people anyway through Sunday. More Americans agree that the government should negotiate drug prices with drug companies than believe in Christmas. I mean, it's like 85% of the population is solely behind this, and we know it's not going to happen because of the way our politics is. There's only a couple of senators required to be picked off by pharma, and some of it is in the Build Back Better. About $30 billion worth a year of savings is in the Build Back Better.
Head fake. But
it's going to go. That's going to go when it gets in front of Manchin and Sinema in order to get through the Senate. And we are paying these incredible prices for drugs here, which we're not only paying incredible prices for drugs, we're also letting the politics and the legal system has allowed things like Humira, which should have had its patent expire 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Patent now expires in the 2030s because of some, jiu-jitsu legal stuff that none of us can understand.
70% of all of the patent litigation is about the extension of patents that are expiring versus new drugs.
Absolutely. I mean, none of this is about new innovation for new drugs, which, by the way, the drug companies are doing pretty badly at, given the amount of money they're spending. But the also thing is we have to have high prices because of innovation. Every drug company spends roughly double on sales and marketing what it spends on R&D. I mean, we just know that's the case. It's been the case since I've been in healthcare. And so all these arguments go on and on. We know that they are very, they are punitive on individuals. There are people dying because they can't afford their insulin. They're punitive on the rest of us who pay for health insurance, pay for drug prices. And yet there's political capture of the process by the pharma industry. And that's what we got until come the revolution, which I don't know when that's coming. So
it's coming.
Yeah, let me know, Matt. I'll
well, we
adjust
should
my
be on the
plans.
streets, not behind the microphone. I mean, maybe I don't know.
At least I'll put a tie on.
We've got to get Mark Cuban on to talk about his new solution.
Well, I mean, that is interesting. Cuban's one, and then the one that Intermountain set up, what's that called?
Yep.
You must know that.
Yep, the generic manufacturing collaborative.
Can you create a kind of non-profit generic manufacturer to come after these guys with their patent extensions and to lower the price? But it is crazy out there. But I would say this is not a new issue, right? We've known about this for 30 years. People have been complaining about drug prices for 30 years. It was a big part of the Clinton administration's attempt to pursue health reform in the 90s. It actually got semi-settled by the Medicare Modernization Act and the drug extension in 2003. That's nearly 18 years ago.
But what's changing? I think there are three things that are changing. One is the aging of America. 1 out of every 4 people on chronic meds can't afford their drugs. And you talk to Congress people. Now, I love the fact that pharma is getting cheap. They didn't even bother buying off senators. They bought three congressmen to just block it on the Democratic side. It was actually very, very clever. And as David pointed out, for $150,000, it's a pretty damn good investment.
That's like I got charged that for like 3 doses of biologic, at Children's Hospital. So.
But what's fascinating is healthcare executives, and we had, Pat Garrity on from Florida Blue, who said, now government needs to negotiate. We've been pushing this for a while, and there's all kinds of ways. Just going after the biologics. 80% of all the price increases have been on the standard chemical compounds, not the cool new biologics. We can protect life-saving drugs while, preventing life-destroying profits.
But John, I want to understand.
We'll get off that soapbox for the moment, David. What do you have to say
with your
pharma clients? Here's what
I want to know exactly. Yeah, they should be paying more. But the first thing to say is I want to understand what it means. We talk about that the government should negotiate with the pharma companies. Now, as far as I know, the government's actually not such a good negotiator. And one thing a good negotiator does is they have the ability to walk away. So what I think, on the one hand, Matthew, maybe more people believe in price negotiation than believe in Christmas. I don't know how those numbers compare, and especially in San Francisco, I don't know what you're thinking there. But do they believe in negotiation if it means that a certain drug might not be covered by Medicare? And so I wonder about if negotiation is really the right thing. Now, how about just dictating what the price is?
Well, I mean, I think people don't know what it means, right? It's this negotiation. But if you look at the UK, they do that. They walk away in certain categories.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit the nice guidelines. They'll walk away. The same with the Australians. It has to have a cost-benefit thing before it gets approved. And then everyone else just says the price is X. The Japanese just say, here's the price. And by the way, the price goes down every 2 years.
Right. They'll ratchet.
And we'll ratchet you down, and we won't pay something crazy. And now you do get the issue where everyone says, well, they make all their money in the US, so these other markets don't really matter. If the US became like that, what would actually happen? My suspicion is the drug companies would get a bit more disciplined. They might be they might lower their profits. They might try to figure out what are they doing with all that sales and marketing and SG&A spend, which gets. I've been to a few drug companies, but when you go to JP Morgan and the Sanofi or the Ventis, spread is the highest quality.
You get not just hot appetizers, you get sushi.
Well, sushi is cheap, John, because they don't have to cook it.
David Williams just clearly doing a sort of chef special show.
Exactly. It's like,
a culinary podcast where all pricing is understood in the kitchen.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be about. But I think this negotiation thing is a real question. So let's take what you just said about how, first of all, I don't think we're willing to walk away. in the U.S. So I think that's one reason it's not happening here. So then that brings us back to something.
David, how about we just go to CPI plus 3?
How about not? Because that's a bad
consumer
baseline.
price index plus 3.
No,
just give me a cap. Give me a price. Give me something where you at least acknowledge the fact that people are dying.
Well, John, I was just going to say
trying to get drugs that the United States government has actually basically invested the R&D that allowed the pharmaceutical companies to manufacture. We're in crazy town.
John, in my experience, you don't get anywhere in an argument by telling people, your idea is killing people, so why don't you change your mind and not kill people and just injure them? So I think that we go back to the previous president's idea in his administration of benchmark it. Let's just say, let's let the Australians and the Japanese do all the hard work, and we'll just pay what they're paying. And that should actually address Matt's comment about how, well, if they made everything a same price, then they're going to all have to look at it. What do you think of that one? Just outsource we'll make them do it for free. We'll just we don't need ICE or anybody around here. We'll just let NICE do it, and they can send us the bill, and we'll send it right back to them.
Jessica, what's your take on David's celebration of President Trump's drug pricing policy?
I suppose if there's something to be celebrated of the Trump presidency, I feel like this is as good a candidate as anything, right? I'm not.
John, you got to watch out what you ask for. Now you're going to ask her if she likes sushi.
I mean, I do.
But look, guys, in terms of reality, right, that was never, there was a proposal out of the Trump administration to do that, but never got anywhere close to legislation. We actually have some legislation that's passed. Like I said, 85% of the country thinks they're in favor of this, whatever the thing they're in favor of is, which is lowering drug prices and not having people dying because they can't get their insulin and not having to pay, $150,000 a year for some cancer drug that,
But I have a question. Can I ask a question real quick on this? What about the PBMs? Because this is something that it's at least in the space that Matthew and I follow, there are a lot of new startup PBMs out there that are supposedly, allegedly advocating on behalf of TransCare, for example. They're not a PBM, but they're advocating on the part of the large self-insured employer to negotiate drug pricing. They would deal with Walmart to provide those Walmart prescription drug prices to all of their clients. Or there's others like Capital RX, which is a startup PBM. And there's just a little, I don't know, Amazon's doing something. There's the kind of pressure. Are they able to take on the negotiating?
The PBMs, the bête noire, the bad guys in every pharma conversation. If you look at the total amount of dollars that are made in pharmacy, they're at 2 to 3%, maybe down to 2% of total dollars. And pharma is at 70. The rest is distributed among 80 actually between retail and distribution and all kinds of other 340B, all this other stuff. But you're never going to squeeze much price value out of that 3%. Which is where pharma tends to go with whatever pharma CEO you talk to. But whenever an industry concentrates as largely as the PBM industry has into 3 or 4 big players, there's always room for innovation. So I think there's whether it's Transparent or Capital RX, I think there's a lot of opportunity for them to bring new digital solutions, new analysis, particularly around some of the new drug therapies where you can kind of really, there can be some really games played around what should be covered, how it should be covered, who's actually responding, for example, to some of these new biologics versus not. But we're trimming at the edges of price. They can create real value for consumers and for companies and for large employers. But if you really want to bring prices down, I think you got to go with kind of a solution. It's like Matt or David. PBMs are always going to be helpful at regulating a market. But if pharma can raise prices every month to whatever they want for drugs that have to be covered or are perceived to have to be covered on the part of employers and the federal government, and they have infinite pricing power, you're only going to have what you're going to change is the slope of the price increase, not the absolute prices.
So Jessica, what I would say when it comes to PBMs and their claims, I would quote, I won't sing it, but I would quote from Public Enemy. Don't believe the hype.
Please sing it.
Not today. That's only for our premium listeners. We have that coming in there. So I think that the PBMs.
Or was that somebody else?
Don't believe the hype.
Dude, don't date yourself. That was you and me. That was like Run DMC. That's our rap.
No, that wasn't Run DMC. That was either Public Enemy or.
I know. I'm just giving you a generational thing.
Yeah.
Like, let's stay away from it.
Right.
Yeah, it was Public Enemy also, but you only do one song. We only do one song per artist.
So are we fighting the power? Or are we not believing the hype? I don't know.
You don't believe the hype and fight the power. I don't think it's mutually exclusive. So let's talk
I
about
go back to another Spike Lee thing. Do the right thing.
Now, I don't know how many people believe in Christmas, but we're just between Thanksgiving and Christmas right now. So, and even more people believe in Thanksgiving. Not everybody, by the way, but many people. So, where are we?
The British have that on July the 4th.
They have that. They certainly do. Yeah. God save the Queen. Can we sing that one? It comes with a popular tune as well in the U.S., as I recall.
It's a terrible tune in both countries.
It is.
Lyrics in both countries.
It is terrible. So where are we compared to last Thanksgiving, though? You talked about this, Matthew, on terms of, are we in a better place, a worse place for the pandemic and the whole world going
pandemic-wise, we're in a much, much better place because of the vaccines, right? And while we're not pharma, and you can note what Moderna's doing regarding patents and who paid for what, all that stuff, right? The scientists who came up with Moderna and the vaccines at BioNTech and at Moderna have done amazing work, and we're all massively in their debt, right? They had a vaccine within a year, which was pretty damn effective. We had a lot of problems, right? Which is that many countries, including our own, didn't figure out how to give out the vaccines quickly enough. That's basically the Israelis figured it out, and nobody else did. And now everyone else has figured it out, and the Americans have our problem of we've got, you can correlate very highly the people who've been through the right-wing propaganda machine and don't believe in the vaccine, and that's left us vulnerable because we have a large population who's unvaccinated, in which the variants are able to breathe. And we've got the rest of the world, the people in Africa and South America and elsewhere in Asia who haven't had access to the vaccine because the rich countries have hogged it all, right? So you've got some problems, but clearly we're much better off than not having a vaccine because this thing would otherwise be mutating around and around. And as you said, David, the virus gets better at spreading itself and gets less deadly over time, but it's still a pretty deadly virus. It's killed a hell of a lot of people.
It's nasty.
And, and other variants of it, the Lambda one in Brazil were killing younger people. And we're still using a lot of hospital resources on people, even some of them vaccinated, well, most of them unvaccinated. So it could have been a lot worse, but it's been awful, right? And I don't know, that's the other question. Jess is my go-to on this. Is when are we going back to normal? When are we all getting back on planes, going to conferences, going on vacation, going to the soccer or going to the NFL? A lot of that seems to have taken off anyway. And I don't know if we're going to be able to shut that down again because the political backlash of shutting it down again if things get worse is so bad. So I don't know. What do you think, Jess?
About where we're at in terms of getting back to normal. I read something on Twitter. I can't remember who it was. It may have been Andy Slavitt, but he was saying something like, if you're not comfortable doing it right now with a mask on and 2 vaccines, and granted this was before Omicron, so I'm not sure stance on this now, but his point was, if you're not comfortable doing it now with a mask on and being vaccinated, then you're probably going to not do it again for a very long time. So, to me, that's kind of like, that was a signal at the point there of, this is the new normal. And this is normal now. We're going to be masked. We're going to be, getting tests before we can fly places or attend certain conferences, things like that. And it's I feel like that's where we're going to be for a while. And especially now with this new variant. I will say this, though, that I'm going to be pessimistic here for probably the third time. Yeah, the third time.
Vincent, you'll edit this out, I hope.
I know. But you know what? I'm concerned about our health as a population of people globally, not around COVID. I think that we are all much more mentally ill than we were, or at least we're admitting it and facing a lot of challenges with even lower grade type of mental health issues. And I also think that there are a lot of people who are really struggling with, other aspects of having to give up activities and leaving and going to work and having the routine disrupted. And so we're, I think, even more sedentary than we were before. And then all the problems and different types of conditions that come along with gaining weight or, not moving around as much, our cardiovascular health. I do think that overall, at least here in the US on that side, I feel like we are not doing as well with our general day-to-day health as we were in the past. I think that's taken a big hit from last year to this year. Whereas I think last year we were a lot more afraid. But I think that this year it's like having to endure that for this long and still not know. I think that has created a whole new set of issues.
Fair enough.
I just think this is the new abnormal, David. We're not going to go back to pre-COVID. It's all going to be post-COVID. But I think Jess is making a really important point, which is that the long tail of mental health issues and just the pain and complexity of disruption for those parts of the city that were, the country rather, that were shut down, and businesses that shut down forever, and people who migrated to lower cost settings and maybe living with relatives or friends that they didn't want to. I mean, I just think there's a longer tail to this, which is, and there, I sense, even I think we're in a much better shape from a contain, control, and influence the pandemic, and we still haven't got our arms around basic public health. And in a time of anxiety, I think that probably bodes ill for the current administration. Yeah, people are still pretty angry.
Yeah, I think people are very angry, and there's a lot of issues with school closing and shutdowns, and there's still a lot of blame, even though they did get the more vaccines and arms more quickly than they promised, and all that. They seem to have got very little credit for that. On the other hand, if we want to be optimistic, and John, this is the business you're clearly in, and we'll look at, is we have seen the ability to move the healthcare system in a way that wasn't before. We've seen a bigger uptake of, obviously, initially telehealth, but now remote monitoring and a bunch of other stuff that we've kind of all been talking about for years and hasn't really happened. We've seen more moving the business you're in, John, of sort of from more intensive settings to lower intensive settings in the home. And we've shown most of healthcare that all this stuff that we've been talking, this digital health stuff that we've been talking about forever, has some real impact. I also think, hidden under this, we are moving from humans to machines in a good way. So mental health is a good way of thinking about this, right? We're out of therapists. Okay, so every therapist has been signed up by Lyra or Headspace Health, as it now is, Ginger, paying them the big bucks to come on, and we're all short of therapists out there. But at some point, you've got to say that a lot of this stuff in mental health and in physical health can be done by some combination of remote monitoring, machine-based, cognitive behavioral therapy, machine-based tracking. I have a thing on my phone called Wobot, which I talk to about how I'm depressed or whatever. And we're just in the early days, but I think that transition to scaling using technology is still
Matt, I think it's a tectonic shift. I think we've been betting on more care to the home for a generation. It happened, and it's not going back. And I think people, not just teenagers a few years ago are the only people who are comfortable texting the machine. My 88-year-old mother is happy texting a machine as long as she gets an answer that's useful for her. She doesn't want to go visit a doctor or a hospital. And she's actually hearing about all these things. And there's that great Saturday Night Live Alexa episode, but the convergence is a happy one. And it does have, to tie it back to digital health, the opportunity that it starts to make the promise of that bridge to better healthcare at a lower cost. That's more integral, more personalized, and more responsive. And to Jessica, to your point, something that I actually want to interact with versus not, more possible. And so I think that is a happy, honestly, surprise. I would not have bet that we would have made as much progress based on a global health crisis as we have.
So, John, just for purposes of registering that trademark, that's Tectonic, TECHTONIC. And John, this is a real partnership, this show. So I want to give you the opportunity to sing us out if you'd like to.
By the way, David, I'm pretty sure that Lisa Sunan and David, what's David's last name, had Tectonics as a podcast for many years, and I think they've closed. Closed it now, but you want to worry about the lawsuit you're getting yourself into immediately.
Yeah, I'm worried about that.
John, we are equal opportunity. John covers the legal fees, so yeah. But I'm waiting for the song, John. What do we got?
I just want to thank Matt and Jessica for joining us and illuminating our show with new insights and better anecdotes. That really thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Well, anyway, that's it then for another episode of CareTalk, and I'll say. Don't. Okay. We'll say I'm David Williams, president of Health Business Group.
And I'm John Driscoll, the CEO of CareCentrix. Thanks for listening, and please subscribe on your favorite service.